Let me close this up. People from the district in the chat saying Granger didn't even stand a chance. Even my distinct friends, we're done with her. We're voting for John. All right, folks, you ready? You ready? Like and share. Like and share. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. It's Wednesday, the day after Halloween, and the air smells different, and it ain't because it's autumn. It's not because it's getting colder. Listen, I was going to try to pack them in into the same show, or both into the same show, but let's take our time and let's do this right, shall we? Listen, before we forget to move on here, don't forget election 2023 coverage. November 7th starts at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we have to make sure that we're right on the money as soon as we go live, because we'll have Kentucky close. Polls are from either 6 to 6 or 7 to 6. I have to go back and check it out, but they'll give us some of the early indicators. We're also going to talk. I'll give you a couple of counties starting. We'll talk about them today. We'll start with that a little bit today. That, for instance, Andy Beshear in certain counties has targets he's going to have to hit. Cameron has targets he's going to have to hit. Right now, the polling favors Beshear. Kentucky polling is very bad. It's one of the worst states. You cannot count Cameron out at this point. Typically, when you go back and look at the average of polls, you'll see that they get the Democratic share of the vote roughly correct, but it is the Republican share that is grossly understated. If turnout, the conventional wisdom is that the higher the turnout, the better it will be for Cameron, even though most people haven't gotten to that point yet. Typically, conventional means that everyone knows and understands it, but the wisdom, let's just put it that way, is that the higher the turnout, the better it will be for Cameron. But we saw what happened in Louisiana. Jeff Landry was not forecast to outright win a majority, and yet he did. So, again, you cannot count Cameron out. We'll go over some of those counties, but starting at 6 p.m., which is November 7th, next week, starting at 6 p.m., we will have Kentucky, Mississippi, the Virginia House of Delegates and Senate. We'll also have the Ohio issues, both of them, marijuana, legalization of marijuana, and the abortion amendment. And then, of course, we will have the special election for Rhode Island, which actually is one of the later, probably, that we'll get results for. But all of the live graphics will be up. You'll be able to follow them, follow along with the show, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of a treat here. Locals, total flop the other day, trying to test that. Total crash, total flop. Still working on it, and we will use that platform to test. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Want to up it. We want to up the game a little bit, right, Laura? We want to up the game. Amen. Amen. Especially since this is a great opportunity. Even if some things don't work, we'll be able to, figure out how to make them work by the time a lot of these primaries come. And then we'll increase as the primaries go, leading up, of course, to the main event next year, which will be hopefully a straight up high production value election show. That's the plan. Beyond, and of course, we always do great production on election nights when they work, unlike last year, which is not going to happen again this year. We always have high quality content, but we want to up our graphics game. All right, that's the name of the game. All right, so big news, big story. It's a huge story. Not a month after not only Kevin McCarthy is ousted, of course, but then Mike Johnson from Louisiana replaces Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. We see major developments that are beneficial, of course, to the base of the Republican Party. Because let's not forget, the main problem the Republican Party had, folks, was that it was not representative of its voters. All right. They do not do the will of the voter or follow the will of the voter in the same fashion that Democrats as a party do. I mean, that's just the reality. All right. So we need to keep it in mind, even though I thought it was kind of not a smart idea to take on somebody like Kevin McCarthy, to take on the idea of getting a new speaker without first having a plan. And at the end, it worked out. Mike Johnson, as vulnerable as he is now, because he has to do the little tightrope walk, he's still is the most conservative, the most MAGA speaker, and the media hates him. Are you watching Morning Joe? And I know most of you probably can't stand the show and you don't watch it, but Morning Joe has flipped out. Believing in the foundational principles of this nation, believing in any sort of biblical principles, the fact that he's a no-name person, they say, that he's not supported by all these donors, that's a bad thing to them. It's a bad thing to the establishment. It's not a bad thing to the voter. All right. But that's not even all of this happening. Kevin McCarthy's got a primary challenger in the friend of the show. You know him well, David Giglio. And we'll talk about that as well. But today, major scalp within weeks. God, this fly. Major scalp, which is Kay Granger. Oh, my goodness gracious. Let's add this to the stage and let's get this going. We know this was coming out. I put this out on yesterday. We had all been hearing the buzz. I'm going to give you the backstory. John's going to come by next hour. He's going to share with us where he's moving, where he's going to go from here. But we kind of knew this was coming. I'm going to tell you before I read this, there are going to be people who try to pretend that John did not push out Kay Granger. John pushed out Kay Granger. All right. She could not face him. We'll show you some of the polling. And she even acknowledges some of that polling in the second part of her paragraph. Yeah, bye-bye. It doesn't get any bigger. It doesn't get any badder than Kay Granger. First of all, that photo is probably 20 years old. All right. I'm sorry, Laura. I'm not going to be nice about this. It's ridiculous. They have to be. They don't want to ever listen. They don't ever want to be representative or responsive, but then they want to pretend it's like your duty to be nice to them after they've been brought to heel. She cried uncle. She's out. When John O'Shea was thinking about running, he said he wanted to, well, first of all, this is something else I want to talk about. How the Jeff Rowe and company wing of the Republican consulting class tried to sabotage John O'Shea because he would not hire them. Because he did not want the Never Trump consulting wing of the party running his campaign. It is the kiss of death with the president if you hire those schmucks. Ken Paxton, who is a very good friend with John O'Shea, does use them, and he has for years. Ken Paxton has endorsed John, in fact. All right. But, he's the only one who gets that pass. They ran smears against this guy. They started rumors against this guy because they wanted his campaign. They knew that she was a target. She could be beaten. It's huge prestige. Folks, this is a huge scalp. She is the chair of the Appropriations Committee. I have had people unwilling to want to touch this race because they were afraid of her position. It's a powerful position. It's the center of Washington, D.C. in the House of Representatives. That and the Armed Services Committee. House Intel is pretty powerful too, but in the midst of all of these battles over spending and the speaker and this, that, and the other thing, Kay Granger played an intricate part. John O'Shea was on this program. He told us a little bit over a week ago about how she whipped the votes to destroy Jim Jordan's bid for speaker, along with Bacon in Nebraska, the chair of the Armed Services Committee. So she can pretend that it's time to move on and I want to make room for new leaders. She's full of crap. They sat down at the lunch. They asked John to wait, which, by the way, Jeffro's people told John not even have that lunch. No, you don't want to do that. Well, John's an honorable guy, and he wanted to give her the courtesy of extending, not a hand of friendship, but at least giving her the courtesy as a 30-plus year member of the House to know that he will mount this bid against her. And that's just the kind of man John is. The political consultant class told him not to do it. He did what he thought was right. He goes to lunch. They ask him to wait. Kay wanted to run again. She wanted to run again. Her health is not great. Republicans are a little bit hypocritical. You cannot trash Joe Biden's obvious mental decline and ignore Mitch McConnell and ignore Republicans like Mitch McConnell and Kay Granger, who are similarly in bad physical and mental shape. She was still, nevertheless, as one of the most powerful members of Congress. F-37, folks, that's her baby. That's her champion. Lockheed Martin was a longtime backer. I mean, she's military-industrial complex all over her. Let's read her statement before we read a local report, all right? Statement by the House Appropriations Chairwoman, Kay Granger, November 1st, 2023. Today, House Appropriations Chairwoman Kay Granger released the following statement. Today, I am announcing that I will not seek re-election to the United States House of Representatives in 2024. Serving my community has been the greatest honor, and I have always sought to improve the lives of my constituents. As the first female mayor of Fort Worth, first Republican United States Congresswoman from Texas, and the first female Republican appropriations chair. It sounds like a Democrat to me, honestly, right? I have been able to accomplish more in this life than I could have imagined, and I owe it all to my incredible family, staff, friends, and supporters. The staff that showed up at the meetings demanding John O'Shea resign or withdraw from the race because he was the precinct chairman, yeah. And they thought that was somehow a conflict of interest. Having all of this money flooding into your campaign from K Street, from the military-industrial complex, from Big Pharma, from all these other interest groups, rent seekers, that's not a conflict. But somehow being a chair of a grassroots organization is. The United States of America is the greatest country in the world because our people and the vision of our founding fathers who created a nation that ensures every man, woman, and child has the opportunity to succeed. As I announce my decision not to seek re-election, I am encouraged by the next generation of leaders in my district. It's time for the next generation to step up and take the mantle and be a strong and fierce representative for the people. Although I am not running for re-election, I plan to serve out the remainder of my term and work with our new speaker and my colleagues to advance our conservative agenda and finish the job I was elected to do. I don't even know where to start with that. When Kay Granger got in the U.S. House of Representatives, was the United States stronger or weaker than it is now? When Kay Granger entered the U.S. House of Representatives, was the United States richer or poorer than it is now? When Kay Granger got into the U.S. House of Representatives, was the military might of the U.S. relative to other nations stronger or weaker than it is now? What exactly was conservative about Kay Granger's multi-decade tenure in the U.S. House of Representatives? And I am encouraged by the next generation of leaders. Do not be surprised if they try to put one of Kay's successors, hand-picked Dade Phelan friends, into this race. It doesn't matter anyway because John's going to steamroll them. But don't be surprised because these people never allow the voters to have the final say. They have to be forced into it. They have to be forced to resign. With all of the budget battles coming up now, what is the point of Kay Granger even remaining in the House of Representatives if she doesn't plan to face the voters? All right, and here's a story I want to read to you because it's not as the rewriting of history in Kay Granger's statement is something to behold. It's not quite that favorable to her because there's a lot of stuff in here that really exemplifies the problem Republicans have and why this is an enormous victory for MAGA and America First. The speaker removal was huge. Huge. Mike Johnson is apparently a better fundraiser than people expected. It's just coming from different areas. If you go look at her FEC report, she has no money coming in other than special interest. There aren't small dollar donors. There aren't voters, individual people from the 12th Congressional District of Texas. It is all K Street. It is all PAC money. All right, this came up, by the way, they updated it November 1st at 11:12, but this was up yesterday, late at night. We had been hearing, I'm trick-or-treating with my kids, and I'm getting blown up. You know, it looks like this is going to happen. It's because we did suspect it. There had been rumblings. She is not physically well. But again, don't let people tell you that it was her health that caused her to decide to step down. They just polled. And they saw what we saw. Chris Putnam nearly beat her and would have beaten her in 2020. Likely. It was a closer race than the one with John now, but likely would have beaten her. She got Trump to bail him out and barely got out of it. Putnam got around 40% of the vote, though, still, even though he didn't have the money or the resources that John's going to have. He didn't have the support that John is building. With the impeachment of Ken Paxton, it got off to a rough start, and she was waiting to see whether or not she thought she could hang in there. Then McCarthy, her trough, is removed as the speaker. They do everything, she and others like her do everything in their power to try to stop Jim Jordan from becoming speaker and reinstate Kevin McCarthy. Understand that if they were successful at reinstating Kevin McCarthy as the speaker, even if it was one of their short-term plans that they floated, will make Jim Jordan a speaker until January and then Kevin's going to get the gavel again, she would not have bowed out of this race. But they got the polling. They see the handwriting on the wall in the House. And this, Laura, it's almost impossible for me to overstate how big of a victory this is for the voters of the Republican Party. Representative Kay Granger, Fort Worth, announced Wednesday morning. They redid this article because they had been citing sources, all right, like I did yesterday. She announced Wednesday she won't run. She plans to serve out the remainder of her term. Serving Mike and I say we have a special election right now. That's what I say. I don't like this. Now she's in the House. I didn't like it when Adam Kinzinger did it. I didn't like it when Liz Cheney said, I don't think I'm going to run, but even though she did and then got creamed anyway. I don't like it when they say they're not going to run and then they stay there. Why? Because they don't have to fear the voter anymore. They're completely going to kowtow to those who are giving them their severance package on the way out the door. I'm not going to reread her crap from the article. Granger, 80, decided some time ago that she did not want to run. Well-placed sources told, she decided finally when Kevin was removed and it was not possible to reinstate him again. That's when she really decided. She knew the polling was going to be bad, and it was worse, apparently, than they thought it was going to be. But she wanted John to wait. She asked John to wait 2 years. She had things, she had loose ends that she wanted to tie. And she had people that she wanted to make sure were all right. I'm not going to read it again. And John, she says, he said no. And gave the voters another choice. And she had no choice herself but to say uncle. Granger represents Texas's 12th congressional district, which covers western Tarrant County and much of Parker County. This is why I want to get into this with you guys a little bit. Conservatives do much better in Parker, but she had been able to hang on against several primary challengers by winning Tarrant County by a lot. All right, so we're talking about 70-30, 80-20 kind of split, depending on turnout. Parker is, it covers much of Parker. It's much more America First. It's much more MAGA. It's much more conservative, but they are outnumbered by the wealthier, more credentialed, once upon a time, more traditional Tarrant County. And when Taran moved against her, John did a very good job of courting people in Tarrant as well as in Parker. You know, Parker's going to be the base for anybody like him in a campaign like this. But he did a great job going to people in Tarrant and saying, look, I look who I am. Get to know me. He's a likable guy. He is not one of these guys like David Giglio, by the way. Look at what McCarthy's strategy is clearly going to be with him. They try to paint you as an extremist. John is very difficult to paint as an extremist. He's very well-spoken. He's educated. He's calm. He's so nice. He has kind eyes. I mean, it's so hard to turn him into this monster the way that normally the establishment tries to do. And once Tarrant County began to follow the same trend that we've been seeing in Texas and elsewhere. Do you remember when we polled it and I'll show it to you in a bit. We polled it and we showed you that this was in fact going to end up a proxy fight anyway between the DeSantis establishment wing, whoever it ends up being by the time they get to Texas, and the MAGA wing. And in this district, if any non-MAGA or anti-Trump or Trump opponent is going to do well, they have to do well in Tarrant County. They have to do well in this district. And it was just nothing but bad news for them because even this district had shifted considerably more America First. Also, what's working against the establishment in this district? Interesting. While some white educated or credentialed Republicans voted for Biden in this area, it is getting more Hispanic. And there is no demographic that indicates they are more MAGA than Hispanics in the 12th congressional district. And Laura with the whoop whoop in the other room. She is the chair of the powerful House Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for funding most of the federal government's activities. When contacted by the report about her plans Tuesday afternoon, Granger said, "We haven't figured it out yet. We'll figure it out soon. Keep in touch." She played a key role in a group of 20 who blocked Jim Jordan. Remember, they denied that when John first said it. They're so foolish. They're such liars. Right, Laura? Just like DeSantis wasn't meeting with Team Ryan and Team McCarthy to build a donor apparatus to run against Donald Trump, right? They always lie when they're caught. They always lie, and then you have to force the truth out of these freaking liars. She whipped the committee. She threatened to throw people off of the Appropriations Committee if they didn't vote against Jim Jordan. Eventually, she buckled when McCarthy told everyone except for John Duarte, apparently, who was still walking around like a bumbling idiot that very morning, talking to media about how he's going to support the plan. And I believe it was a reporter from Politico who told his office, they threw in the towel, right? And they're just supporting Mike Johnson. He had no idea. He's so unimportant that nobody even pays attention to him anymore. Valadeo and him are in deep trouble. So you better make up those seats elsewhere. She supported Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson's successful race for the spot. As the chair of the Appropriations Committee, Granger was in the middle of spending battles inside her party. She delivered on a number of projects important to Fort Worth. That's true, but we're going to get into some of the Panther Island, Center City Flood Control Project, defense funding, and the USS Fort Worth, the city's namesake ship. She's the ship's sponsor that she has protected from the U.S. Navy cost cutters. Granger has also championed the federal government's use of the F-35 fighter jet, a plane built at Fort Worth's Lockheed Martin facility. Lockheed bailed on her this cycle. Lockheed told Kay Granger, "You're going to lose. This guy, John O'Shea, is going to beat you. We're going to stay out of it. We're not making an enemy with the new guy." Some of her top donors are from the defense and air transport industries, Bloomberg reports. No, basically, that is her donor base. She's the most powerful Texan we got, Ben Barnes, a lobbyist and former lieutenant governor of Texas, who is a Democrat, but has known and admired Granger for years. I hope she runs. I bet you do, Ben, but she's out of here. For decades, Granger was the public face of Panther Island. They noted this as an accomplishment before. We'll talk to the voters in the 12th Congressional District, and they don't find some of her little domestic projects to be particularly flattering of her character. A $1.16 billion flood control project that will reroute part of the Trinity River and create hundreds of acres of riverfront development near downtown Fort Worth. That is textbook stupid Republican, by the way. All you're going to bring in is rich liberals, and you're going to help the area get more blue. Thomas Marshall, a political science professor at the University of Texas at Arlington, said Granger's absence will leave a big void for Fort Worth in Congress. No, I think they'll survive just fine. He described Granger as a, quote, giant in the Texas delegation. We heard the same thing, and we're going to hear it with McCarthy, too. We heard the same thing when Dave Bratt took out Eric Cantor. Did Virginia's 7th Congressional District fall apart? No. They act like these areas can't survive without them. The issue of seniority in the United States Congress and in Washington, D.C. in general, even in bureaucracies, is a corrupting force. Rent-seeking and seniority are the two forces combined that have almost single-handedly corrupted our elected chambers. What am I talking about? Rent seekers don't want to have to buy a new congressman or a new congresswoman every 2 to 6 years if it's a U.S. senator, for instance, 2 if it's a House of Representatives. Seniority allows them to decide what bills move forward, get tabled, what's prioritized, what's not, what dies in committee, what advances. You get what I'm saying? This all works for the benefit of special interest because they want people to stay there for as long as possible. Why is that? It protects their favored special interest legislation. If the Congress that passed the bill 8 years ago is the same Congress 8 years in the future, then you don't ever have to worry about them repealing or revising or changing anything that works to the benefit of the rent seekers. That was Kay Granger's game, has been for decades. This is why nothing ever changes, because rent seekers have lawmakers like this in the system of seniority that is currency in DC, folks. It's currency. Between the special interests and the rent seekers locking down our lower and upper chamber like that, and the FBI and other corrupt intelligence organizations either blackmailing our executive, our duly elected presidents, making sure that they don't ever really, go after real change or pursue real change of the status quo. And hell, if they don't have anything in their folder by the time the director of the FBI gets to the Oval Office, by God, they're going to make something up. And that's what that is the lesson of the Trump administration. If they didn't find anything on you, they will just frame you. This is why our government is crippled. This is why our society is going down the tube. This is why our status as a superpower is basically all but over. And this is why a debt bomb is about to blow up and take all of us with it. We are crippled in a way that no prior generation has been that crippled. It has gotten worse over the years. It is nothing new for parts of the permanent bureaucracy to blackmail and to bribe and to extort elected members, even of the executive, it's himself or herself, But it has gotten worse as the time has progressed, and they have gotten stronger. And as that has been the case, it went from, hey, Mr. Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, you can stop with this BS, or I could tell the country your wife is a lesbian. What's it going to be? So FDR plays ball. That evolved into, if you don't play ball with us, we will frame you as a Russian agent in one of the worst acts of sedition ever in this country, and the media will help us. Don't worry about Congress conducting oversight because we have them like this. They're too busy being slaves to the special interest, and if they do present a problem, we will just hang something around their neck too. Yeah. Anyway, she helped Fort Worth punch above its weight. A giant in the Texas delegation, the University of Texas at Arlington political science professor said, Tom Marshall. Giant. She helped Fort Worth punch above their weight. That, you know what? If you're okay with corruption and special interest, all of that is true. A longtime member of the Appropriations Committee, Granger, had put a word out earlier this year that she wanted a waiver from GOP rules that limit committee leadership to 3 consecutive 2-year terms so as to be able to serve yet another term as the chair if the GOP held the House in 2024 and she served the ranking member if Republicans did not. Whoa, Laura. Which is it? She's getting old and doesn't feel well and John pushed her out, or John pushed her out. Because here she fully expected, and by the way, was getting that waiver. She asked for it in April. She fully expected to be in Congress in 2024 and 2025 and 2026. So let's cut the crap. That decision is up to the Speaker, however, who has influence on the selection of committee chairs, but wouldn't be made until next year. Granger served 2 terms as the ranking chair when the GOP was in the minority, and in 2022, with a slim Republican majority in the House, was elected chair. Marshall does not expect anyone, including her eventual successor, to be able to fill her shoes within the next decade. Congress rewards seniority, he said. Whoa. Corruption rewards seniority. Rent seekers award and reward seniority. That is the entire problem with the system. People should read Todd Zawicki's work when he was at George Mason. It's absolutely profound on this. If you've read Our Virtuous Republic by me, yours truly, a book dating back now over 10 years, you would see that this is one of the major problems. What can be done about it? Term limits. You'd have to repeal the 17th Amendment without it. We put too much power in the power to select leaders. We put too much into one lever. And honestly, I'm all for voter sovereignty. But when it's an unfair system where the game is rigged and the rent seekers get to give these people as much money as God needed to be able to defend their seats, to trick the voter who is not dumb but busy, otherwise distracted, is trying to earn a living, the system is totally rigged. Our founders did not make the system like that on purpose. It's not because they thought people were inherently stupid, but they were given the power to directly elect their House of elected representatives in the lower chamber, and they were given the power to elect directly their state legislators. And then the state legislators picked the senators. Why were they doing this? They were diversifying power. It's not that they thought you were too dumb. But when Kay Granger raises $10 million, $5 million to spend in a district race. And a challenger raises 50 grand, 150 grand. That's it. It's not a legitimate. It's not legitimate's not the right word. It's not a representative system. It's not going to be, because where are they getting all of those millions of dollars from? Not the people in the district who don't have it to even fund the challenger. They're getting it from the special interest groups. Senators, folks, $50, $60 million races now today. This was never supposed to be like this. This way, if Raphael Warnock did not do the job that he said he would do, or he was working against the interest of his own state and the voters, by God, the state legislature is going to remove his ass. And all of the doomsday scenarios that we heard in the treason of the Senate metropolitan series that ran to convince people to back the 17th Amendment, none of them came to fruition. All of the warnings against it did. And average tenure, like those of Kay Granger, average tenure in the U.S. House exploded only after senators were also given the same treatment. And when average tenure exploded within Senate tenure, the House followed. Why? Because you got to make sure the rent seekers got to make sure they have the lower house in check too. When you look at the field of candidates, who are these people, and are they prepared to make their end of career commitment for the next 25 or 30 years? He said. Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. Let's go to some of the polling, and I think actually. Well, I don't want to give away stuff I shouldn't give away, but voters in the district didn't want another career politician. How do I know? We polled all of this. Which one would you rather have? And actually, I don't think John, I don't think he would particularly, right. I think I got the okay for this. Hang on, let me get the more expanded version. Even voters who thought that Kay Granger should have, what's the word? I guess, let's give her reverence that she deserves on the way out. Right? I mean, let's be at least, I don't want to say respect. Yeah, respectable to her. Let's at least give her due credit for the service she's given, but it's time to move on. It's time for new leadership. Even voters who respected her time as a congresswoman, they still thought she had to go. It wasn't. Things are not working. What they do not want is 25, 30-year terms. And I'll just tell you right now, strongly support term limits in the 12th Congressional District. Here. Well, let me read this and we'll come back to, let me read this and we'll come back to the polling on it. Granger, a former educator who graduated from Texas Wesleyan University, has been a trailblazer from her time as Fort Worth mayor. I'm not going to read all this glowing BS. In Congress, she was the only woman to this and blah, blah, blah. She served the city mayor. She does have, what's it called? She does have a friend who is also now the mayor of Fort Worth. She was just reelected, but I don't think she's going to get in, and her positions are super woke. And Republicans, she would never make it through primary. Now, Dade Phelan has a friend that they could try to put in there and make, what's the word? Sound more conservative than he is, but I just don't think it would work. Literally 9 in 10 support term limits in this, literally 9 in 10 support term limits in this district. And a private sector person who does not plan to stay in Congress has majority support over a public sector person who has experience, right? But at the end here, what was real huge, and you guys can see this, I know it's really small, 72% supported term limits. And said it was time for new leadership. So she was out and done long before. This situation with people who trying to be fair here. Again, I brought it up before, but the situation with people who aren't physically or mentally capable of serving out their time, again, it really, you have to remember that she was not going on her own free will. She wasn't going anywhere. She had to be forced out. She, to the very end, worked against you, the Republican voters out there who are listening, to the very bitter end. All right. And this is like not the same. The stakes are higher, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The stakes are much higher than even what we saw in 2015, 2016, even in 2020 when Chris Putnam ran against him. And by the way, now Chris Putnam's backing John O'Shea, or latest one is Ken Paxton is. I mean, the hammer just came down this time. And she didn't want to be embarrassed. Republicans cannot, for the sake of special interest and rent seeking and to preserve the stupid narratives that they give themselves, they cannot continue to ignore the hypocrisy in their own party. And the voters now, like the tide feels like it's shifting. The voters don't seem to want to put up with it anymore. Most of the time, we still see all of these incumbents reelected at 90 plus percentage rates, folks. 90% reelection plus 90 plus percent reelection rates for incumbents. So it's it's something significant when a powerful incumbent decides not even to make it or not even try the race. Forget about making it to the finish line, the winner or the loser. Not even try the race. To forfeit before the gun. Well, the gun really. Would you say the gun already went off, Laura? I mean, the race was underway. Yeah. The gun went off. She just quit and the gun went off. She knew. She got to the first turn. She was way behind. He was smoking her. And she quit. But this is what has to happen for Republicans if they intend to be a party that's going to survive and a party that's going to be an effective counterweight to, or a countervailing force against the opposing party. Because right now, like I said, the government itself is crippled, and all we've been watching are little by little by little. The left has been advancing while the right has not been able to counter that at all. And the truth is, because Kay Granger's definition of what is and what isn't conservatism is very different than yours. Like reading her statement, it's unbelievable that anyone like her would ever put out a statement like that. It's truly, I just don't, it's delusion. And in this day and age, they don't even pretend to care like that anymore or pretend to dupe you like that. Perhaps it's more about her age, guys, and they just want her to be able to go off with dignity. That's the word I was looking for before, by the way. They want her to just go off into the sunset with dignity. I don't know. But there's nothing conservative about her tenure. They edited that article from last night because what they didn't want to tell you about was the corruption involved in those projects. The allegations of corruption and allegations of nepotism. Her son, who is a total wreck, being put in charge of these projects that she would fund through her position in the federal government, in the House of Representatives. She would direct appropriations to the district to fund these projects, which her family with no experience would be in charge of. That's fine if the projects were done correctly. That's fine if the projects were completed anywhere near on time or anywhere near within the budget. But that's not what happened. The island project became, sort of Damocles over her head every time she ran for re-election. Eventually, local officials moved to remove her. They moved to remove her influence from these projects. She was later drawn out of her district. Literally, her district was later drawn away from some of these projects that she was failing on, and she had directed money to her family. Again, her son is a major figure in it. But there was only one way to stop her, and that was for the legislature and the people in the area who represent the area to advocate that her district, she be drawn away from those projects. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. So they want to give her accolades for bringing home the bacon. They want to throw a claim at her like that for that. I don't know, folks. I don't want a congressman who brings home the bacon. I want a congressman or woman who just makes sure that the people in the district aren't being unfairly disadvantaged by others who are trying to bring home their bacon to their constituents. I don't want Congress to have a say or a role in giving out competitive advantages. Sadly. And that's all part of it. And honestly, we've gone over this before. We've had shows where I've explained, the rulings from Munn v. Illinois and on about how eventually, especially in the Senate, the power to regulate became such a coveted role that rent seekers wanted to be able to control. And they did that through how they changed the way our Congress is elected, how they changed. They essentially are the reason we moved from more of a citizen legislature at the federal level to careerism, to political careerism. That is how it happened. And Kay Granger is the spokeswoman for that system. It is a major, major scalp. There's no doubt about it. All right. While we do some, I think I'm actually going to, I don't know. Should I take a break? It's already 12:47. Maybe I'll take a break. There was a local report about David Giglio that I watched, and I was going to run it because I think it's kind of important to run here. Probably run it again when we get him on Friday. But for right now, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to run this, and then I'll do the read. This way, it doesn't get in the way of our interview with John. I just want to make sure that we have time to get to the polling, which is a big deal. Okay. All right. So, yeah. You guys see the YouGov poll? You see the YouGov poll? I told you, Laura. It's one of the most liberal, left-leaning, I don't know what the word, it's Democrat bias, pro-Democrat bias polls out there. It's a YouGov panel, but The Economist is ultimately the ones weighting their data. It's the same data that's going to Yahoo News, same data that's going to, I think there's another one, CBS, their battleground tracking poll. A lot of that is all sourced by the same data set, which is YouGov. And then ultimately the polling editors and whatever their little experts and directors at the news agency obviously are weighting how they want to weight that data set, which is why they get different results. But it is now a tie again between Trump and Biden. And I want to go over this, but it's now a tie again. But the House is Democrat +1, with Republicans running slightly behind Donald Trump in share of support. Big change, big shift. 2016, 2020, it was always that Trump was running behind Republicans. And then in many areas, if not outright nationally, he would outperform them. This time around, he's just outperforming them. And the polling is showing that. We'll see whether or not with the new Speaker of the House gets its acts together. But I'm telling you, mark my words, Kevin McCarthy is likely to fold up the tent the same way that Kay Granger folded her tent. Let's run this clip. Local news that was covering David Giglio's run in California's, in Kevin McCarthy's Bakersfield district, right? This is a much, much redder district than California 13, for instance. And you would think Trump has some 35 points in the primary. Instead, you have Kevin McCarthy, who's sitting overseas with fat Frank Luntz, mocking Donald Trump and laughing at Donald Trump. Let's roll this while we take a break. We'll come back after this. Have a quick word from my sponsor. Get right back into it, John S. J. And let me give you guys some volume. You probably need that.
McCarthy will have company on the GOP side of the ballot next March if he decides to seek re-election in 2024. David Giglio of Clovis is now eyeing McCarthy's seat in the House of Representatives. 17's Jenny Hudd joining us in studio with more on this candidate who says McCarthy has failed Americans. Jenny?
David Giglio, who himself says he was a political nobody, is now in the spotlight as a MAGA Republican. Back in the 2022 primary, he lost to fellow GOP candidate and now Representative John Duarte of Modesto.
And Kevin McCarthy, to me, represents everything that's wrong with politics.
Meet David Giglio, the 35-year-old Republican challenger to Kevin McCarthy. Giglio says he's about getting things done for the American people, which falls under his being a quote-unquote America First Republican. Is calling you a MAGA Republican accurate?
I will wear that label, but I don't think it's a negative thing. I also think a MAGA Republican is kind of the same thing as an America First Republican. You know, to me, make America great again means all the things I just talked about. And I think that's what President Trump was talking about.
All the things he talked about, meaning setting term limits for politicians so people like McCarthy, who's been in Congress since 2006, can't overstay their welcome. This an area he says he's open to bipartisanship on, and investing in infrastructure, securing the border, and solving the water crisis. To Giglio, Kevin McCarthy is the poster child of inaction.
He made a ton of promises because he spent his whole life wanting to get that gavel, and he was willing to say and do whatever he needed to do to get his hands on it, but he didn't actually intend on delivering those things.
He calls the 8 Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy as courageous and says he would have done the same. This former high school history teacher also stresses local schools, not the government, should have more say over students. McCarthy did not respond to a request for comment on Giglio's campaign and his multiple callouts of the congressman. Jenny Hutt, 17 News.
No, he did not respond. In fact, what he did do was just make behind-the-scene calls. We're going to see what happens with some of the well-known outfits that Republicans traditionally use to smear their primary opponents, because that is obviously in the pipes right now. All right, so we'll talk to David about that on Friday. He actually did an interview with Laura Loomer, which was interesting. I think it's over 100 million views right now. So yeah, we'll see it. Could be an Eric Cantor moment. Kevin is very well funded, but again, I have been told by numerous people they totally expect Kevin will buckle to this challenge as well. So we'll see. We'll see if that's the case. If it is, it would be obviously another huge scalp. I've always said Kevin McCarthy is no John Boehner. Kevin McCarthy is no Paul Ryan, but he sure as hell is no Mike Johnson. And he sure as hell is no Jim Jordan. All right. So he's done what he could. He walked that, he rode the fence between the America First world and the DC world the best any politician possibly could. But remember, David Giglio isn't in Congress right now, so Kevin McCarthy could spend 6 months as the Speaker of the House. I'm serious. They spent millions of dollars to defeat him and have John Duarte, a miserable candidate who they're abandoning now, to lose, who's not conservative at all, no matter how many people who are loyal to Trump try to get this guy to be what he said he was going to be. He refuses to, because he's not. And by the way, his last 2 staffers he just fired, see how much he loves Donald Trump. Those people will tell you he can't stand Donald Trump. So him and David Valadao in deep trouble, as they should be. Find the seats somewhere else. You have a Democrat plus 30 district around the country. You're sure as hell not going to get somebody like Joe Manchin. You're going to get a Nancy Pelosi. You're going to get an AOC. Republicans have to start realizing in your Republican plus 30 districts, you shouldn't have Kevin McCarthy's. and even Greg Murphy's for that matter. All right, let's talk about this. Our friends at Jam and Bean, Michigan-based company. And like I always say, there are no politician heroes in the story of COVID. There are only the story of normal people who are heroes. And the folks at Jam and Bean are just that. All right. I have gone over so many. The popcorn's delicious. The coffee's delicious. We love to get your feedback from them, so keep it coming. They have a great deal right now that they're offering you guys, which is new subscription. Use the promo code TPP40 for the People's Pundit 40. And that will knock off, guess what? No shocker, no surprise, no spoiler. 40% off of the cost of that new subscription when you sign up, whether it's K-Cups or freshly roasted coffee that you're grinding yourself, whatever it may be, whatever subscription. Use that promo code to get 40% off. And every month when it renews, you're still going to get 10% off when that subscription renews. Some really good new flavors they have for the holidays. That's right, Laura? Amazing. Really good stuff. Me, I'm partial, dependent man, but you guys can, I'm sure, make your own. They're very detailed descriptions of what the roast is geared towards, what it tastes like, its notes, and it's just absolutely never let me down yet. So send us your feedback when you pick something that you like, and we'd love to hear about it. I'm a huge fan of the popcorn. Huge fan of the popcorn. The buffalo, I like little spicy stuff. The buffalo came this month, and it was over the moon. It always is good, but it's just over the moon good. You got to watch out for your kids, though, if you're getting it for you, because they'll snag it real quick. Right, Laura? And then, one of the best things, those old school, do you remember those old school honey candies that were like really tough? They were, I don't know if you'd call them taffy, Laura. They weren't, right? They were like, I don't know what you'd call them, but they're delicious. But man, you feel like they could pull the damn filling out if you're not careful. They freeze dry them. And their freeze-dried candy is a lot cheaper than others that I have seen. Freeze-dried candy can be expensive for those of you who haven't tried it. Their honey, those honey things, the freeze-dried honey things, are so delicious. It's ridiculous. Highly addicting, I'll tell you that, right? All right, so again, one more time, jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40. Use the promo code TPP40. Get yourself what you need to stay awake for these long days with the long and hard, tough battles that are ahead of us. All right? Then you can have super energy like People's Pundit and bags under your eyes every single day. The Bido Honey, Pete. Bido Honey. Bitso Honey, that's right.
So you didn't see me put it in the chat at all? No, just ignore that thing,
Honey.
right?
Let me look it up. Oh, that's it. I didn't see it until I saw Pete.
It's Bitso Honey, baby.
Yeah, I want to show people. Oh my goodness. It's so good. This is totally it.
It's sinfully delicious.
And this free-dried is so good. It's better than Bido Honey, Laura. I mean, and I like them. I did. But they'll, like I said, they can rip your filling out if you're not careful. They really can. But the freeze-dried version of it, I think, is better than the original. I really do.
And the freeze-dried Skittles are good.
Oh, man. They are. The freeze-dried Starbursts. You remember those?
Stop.
Oh, the Starbursts.
I can't have sugar.
Yeah, they were awesome. But the Bido Honey is not that much sugar. You're right, Laura. It's not that much sugar. It's just absolutely epically delicious. You know, really good. Well, we have a couple of minutes here before John comes on. I just want to show you what I was talking about, guys. Here's the RCP, latest polls from RCP. Republican nomination. They still have, I'm not surprised because of the way they weighed and because they are a full panel poll. I think Morning Consult is a lot different. Morning Consult has Trump 48. This friggin' fly is driving me nuts. Trump 48. And real quick, let me just put it up there as big as I can for right now. Yeah, so Trump at 61, DeSantis at 13, Haley at 7. I find it interesting that they still have Haley around the same as the Morning Consult poll, right? Even though they have DeSantis 4 points higher and Trump a little bit lower. We're a bit closer to the Morning Consult poll, just not there. We did have Haley 1 point behind DeSantis. I think that is real, but they're just swapping. They're just swapping supporters at this point. There's just a little bit of reshuffling of the deck. But no one's taken away Trump's support. He's not shown any sign of weakness. There was a great article by Mark Caputo for The Messenger about how bad the Des Moines Register poll was, even though the Seltzer poll, it has Trump lower than some of the polls in Iowa. It was devastating news for them, even if you consider it more modest support for Trump. The bottom line is, historically speaking, nobody has gone on to lose the Iowa caucuses with strength like this. And that is not taking into consideration that Trump is overperforming Bush. And he also has more supporters who refuse to change their mind. Bush's support that said, I'm not going to change my mind, was only about 20%. Trump's is anywhere from, this one was 63. We've seen others at 76. So in our own polling, it's about 2/3 to 3/4. That is not normal. That is absolutely solid dug-in support. You can see in the Economist poll, by the way, the YouGov poll, Trump is overperforming Republicans on the generic ballot. Let's see if that changes a little bit. And the CNN poll of South Carolina that was released yesterday was also devastating. DeSantis is now not just in third, he's way behind Nikki Haley in her home state of South Carolina, where he had been ahead of her. All right, so if we take a look at the trend, because this is why I said it's Iowa or bust for them. Mark Caputo is right. You can't beat Trump anywhere else. You're not going to beat Trump anywhere else. All right, now Trump is above 50 in the last 2 out of 4 polls in South Carolina. DeSantis is going the wrong way, even though he went from 9 in the Washington Post poll to 11 in the CNN poll. He's completely collapsed since he was at 28% at the beginning of the year. He has completely collapsed. There's no trend yet up here, but you can see it clear as day. It's a more moderate electorate than Iowa. Not as moderate as New Hampshire. Charles, we can get into the interview, PVD's interview. I'll just, let me just address this before I bring on John. I have met Ron DeSantis numerous occasions. I've been in the same room with Ron DeSantis. I stood in front of Ron DeSantis. I have stood on the side of Ron DeSantis. Wearing Murphy's business shoes, like regular, normal business shoes without heels. I'm not a big guy. I'm about 5'6". With the heels, maybe it makes, not heels, but with the business shoes, maybe it makes me 5'7". I'm not a tall guy, I should say. Ron DeSantis was slightly taller than me with his cowboy boots on, with his heels. Right, Laura? I mean, just being real. I mean, you were there. You've seen it.
He ain't that tall.
Maybe he was 2 inches taller, 3 inches taller with those boots on, right? Something like that.
That's why he likes his boots. They have high heels in them.
Why would he tell them he's 5'11"? He's not 5'11".
Because the man does not live on planet Earth. I was hearing him answer some question about polling. He's like, well, it doesn't matter what the polling says. It's what the people say. Who do you think they're asking?
The poll is what the people say. I'm
like,
yeah, dude. He's like 5'9", NL, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I really don't, but he's got to be like 5'9", 5'8", 5'9". I mean, he wasn't that much taller than me. I'm not a tall guy. And I just own being short. There have been some colossal.
Shorts the new big, baby.
Shorts the new big, baby. There have been some colossal political figures that have been short. And to be so self-conscious of yourself like this and to lie about something so stupid like this makes me, because I am short myself, Casey. So I worry about like little man syndrome. It concerns me. It does, because you shouldn't be this insecure and stupid about your height. It's just stupid. It's just totally dumb. All right, let me bring on our guest, the man himself, the man of the hour, John O'Shea. John, great appearance on War Room this morning. Knocked it out of the park. Thanks for coming on Inside the Numbers, friend.
No, my pleasure, as always. I'm available anytime to get on with you guys.
And we love you for it. I got to ask you, just for your initial reaction right off the bat, what's your reaction to Kay Granger dropping out?
Well, to be candid with you, I wasn't really surprised. I know when I met with her to tell her that I planned on filing and running, and she tried to dissuade me, saying just wait 2 more years. I know that she intended to run, that she intended to seek the waiver for the
Yes.
appropriations chair for a second term. But she lost McCarthy. She's been dealing with some health issues, which I'm not happy for. And candidly speaking, I think she made a wise decision. I mean, look, I don't particularly agree with her or her position on a lot of things, but as a human being, I think she made the right decision to spend time with the family and to kind of hang it up. She's had a long career.
That's one thing I'll say I'll give her, John. You had John McCain. Mitch McConnell's now doing it. I remember I was talking with he's the head of psychiatry at one of the VA hospitals, which is really the overseer of the entire that region. I don't want to say, which region, because then I'll blow it up. I mean, there's only one guy who fills this role, right?
Yeah.
And I remember we were just shooting, and he used to think it was cool. He turned on the TV and was like, oh, look, I'm sitting there having dinner with my wife. And it's like, look, there's Rich, it's on Tucker. And we used to talk a lot about politics. And he said, you can't diagnose someone without meeting them. But there's something really, really wrong with a human being who is dying. He knows he's dying. And one of his last acts is not to be with his family, but to be spiteful. And to make sure that, because for people who don't know the story of John McCain returning to D.C. to vote against Obamacare, he put himself, his physical body, his health, and his family through the ringer to do that. And they knew he did not have much time left on this earth. Yet that's what he chose to do with his time. Mitch McConnell, doesn't he have any family that he wants to spend time with? He instead finds his priority is more to stroking out on TV. Like, I mean, this is really sad, but it's not. It's more than sad. It's a little sick. I mean, at least not a little sick. I'm sick, folks. I mean, it's friggin' sick. At least Kay Granger decided, I'm not going to get beat like a drum like this. I'm going home, and she could have done it another way. You and I both know she wanted to run again. You and I both know she was going to get that waiver, or at least she had back in April told McCarthy she needed that waiver. And he would have given it to her. John, he would have given it to her. But for people who don't know the insides and outs of this business, if you go and look through Kay Granger's filings, you'll see nothing but special interest money, and you'll see transfers back and forth in the McCarthy network. I mean, she was in deep trouble without McCarthy. She was already in deep trouble before. And before you came on, I showed some of our polling of the 12th district. Even people who liked her, John, said it was over. It was time, and they were going to vote for you. So, she was in dire straits. What do you think, though? This is what I want to get your opinion on. It always makes me nervous when a lawmaker, an elected lawmaker, says, I'm not running again, but I'm going to stay here and finish whatever business needs to be finished. So what they're really saying is they don't have the answer to the voters. And I get nervous because they could be extremely reckless, unresponsive, unrepresentative. I'm thinking Adam Kinzinger, folks. I'm thinking others like that. It's been a problem for a long time. I mean, really, if you're not going to run, John, should she still be able to sit this out? I know it's the rules, and the rules are the rules, but what are your thoughts on this? I mean, she could really screw you guys in the 12th district before she goes.
Well, not only really screw us, but just think about the real motivation behind it. I mean, this is her victory lap and kind of farewell tour with all the K Street lobbyists. So trust me, there are going to be a number of deals that she's going to try and cut. And my only kind of buffer there, I think, is the fact that Mike Johnson being the speaker, thank God, is going to preclude from anything too reckless or outrageous occurring, in my estimation.
Well, I'll tell you this. And I'm sorry I didn't get the shot back before I was done. I'll tell you this. I can't overstate how big of a scalp this is, brother. All right. This is, and Bannon said it earlier this morning. He said it doesn't get any bigger. It doesn't get any badder. This is the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee. It's the central hub of DC in the House and, in the chamber, the lower chamber. It's the central hub because this is where everybody wants to get their pickings. Everybody wants to get their pork. Everyone wants to get their pet project. And in that one article, which has been amended since last night, by the way, they were talking about how she was a giant and she, brought the bacon home. Do you think that should be the number one role of somebody in the legislature, whether they have seniority or not, John? I mean, should be bringing the bacon home for these pet projects. And maybe you can illuminate some people who don't know the local issues, but she was bringing home the bacon to then funnel to projects that her son and other people that were in her orbit were not competently running. These became major scandals. I mean, tell people about the last one, and eventually they wrote her out of the damn district to make sure she lost her influence on it.
Well, yeah, it's kind of outrageous. Fort Worth has its own Hunter Biden problem.
Yeah.
People used to tell me, hey, look, I support you quietly. I can't do anything publicly because Kay's chair of appropriations and we need her to continue to bring the pork back for us. And I said, the country's broke right now. We're $33.5 trillion in debt, over $250,000 per household.
Yep.
Are you prepared to write those checks? If not, then you're consigning your kids and your grandkids to a future of debt slavery. And we say we love our kids. So, bringing home the bacon when everybody's hand is out, because guess where ultimately that money comes from? It comes from us.
Yep.
And so you're right. The project that she was most famously or infamously known for here in Fort Worth was what was originally designed to be a flood control project and then was redubbed the Panther Island Project. And they were going to take the north side of downtown and redirect the Trinity River. And in doing so, kind of create a real estate play and have some opportunity for redevelopment. Well, that project was supposed to have been kicked off in 2003, and we got a couple of bridges built that were over dry land, and they just recently approved the Army Corps of Engineer piece and have just started digging the canals. The project's almost 20 years behind schedule, had an initial price tag of $435 million. Latest numbers I'm hearing are it's going to be closer to $1.7 billion. And oh, by the way, who oversaw it up until last year? None other than Kay Granger's son, who, trust me, did not have the resume or the chops to handle a project of that magnitude.
It's unbelievable. You said it best. You guys at Fort Worth, you really had your own Hunter Biden-like kind of problem. Yep. And it's amazing to me. The president has, and I didn't like it, the president has Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, advising him in the White House in the first term. Right. I didn't like it for two reasons. One, the nepotism issue, although if you're Donald Trump, I get that the universe of people that you think you can trust is very small. So I kind of understood that part. And then the main problem is that Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump did not represent the people. Their views did not represent the people that elected him to the presidency. So that bothered me, but not so much that I had to constantly regurgitate the talking points every day on it like the media did. Yet they never did. They spend all of their time, blocking that same kind of criticism over Hunter Biden. They spent no time, not nationally anyway, talking about that with Kay Granger. I mean, it's just, again, another gross double standard. Let me ask you this. Do you think they're going to try, because this is the number one question in there right now, I can see it. People are like, well, who are they going to try to throw in here to stop John now? You and I know about the landscape, but explain that to people a little bit.
Yeah. First of all, though, I do want to say there is some rich irony in the whole Panther Island Project issue, that when the state Republican Party redistricted in 2020, they literally took this little finger out of the district that curls right around the north part of downtown. And when people come in and look at the campaign map and they go, well, why is that partitioned like that? And I said, well, that was the state Republican Party thanking Kay by taking that out of her district and giving it to a Democrat. So I always kind of found that to be humorous. But yeah, honestly, Kay had been talking to other people about possibly finding somebody to run in her stead once she really started considering stepping down seriously. I knew it. She approached some people that I know. And in fact, the one friend who said, well, why don't you support John O'Shea? He's already filed. And the response was, oh, he's way too conservative. And I said, well, in her estimation, I guess I view that as a compliment. So There is a state rep who is not well thought of by the precinct chairs and is candidly not supported by the base, but he represents a wealthy area here. He's been in the state house for a long time, and he's actually, Dade Phelan's, second lieutenant, was part of Ken Paxton's impeachment.
Yep.
And that's the name that's being floated around. In fact, I've already been told by people that he's already sent out multiple mailers. And look, the guy's sharp. He's corrupt as all get out, but that's look, he's part of Dade Phelan's dirty dozen, which for those who are familiar with Texas politics, basically, even though the Republicans controlled the state house, Democrats in essence have controlled it because Dade Phelan has co-opted the whole Democrats as a bloc. And so, Dade, along with these 12 other people, are basically able to go past whatever they want because they've got the Democrat support, and they completely ignore conservative values. So he won't be popular or liked for that. So I think this is a serious misstep on his part. But the other big part of it is he was a voter to impeach Ken Paxton, our beloved attorney general, who happens to be a good friend of mine for the last 20 years. And also, by the way, happens to be one of my first endorsements. So the dichotomy couldn't be more clear. Are you going to vote for an America First candidate who entered the race back when Kay was the incumbent and had the gumption to actually challenge her and has Ken Paxton's full-throated support and endorsement? Or are you going to vote for the guy who was Dade Phelan's lackey, who basically waited until Kay stepped down and, in fact, in all likelihood, collaborated with Kay for it and voted to impeach Ken Paxton? I mean, I think they're sadly mistaken at where the Republican Party is in this district if they think that that's got a chance.
Yeah, this is again in my estimation, this is a year that's going to be everywhere is going to be a proxy fight, right? So this is going to be the America First wing versus the Granger, the MAGA hating wing. Doesn't matter. Listen, people out there support Ron DeSantis. I get that. That's fine. But it doesn't matter if by the time we get to Texas, it's Ron DeSantis or it's Nikki Haley. It's going to be America First versus the old. America First versus the establishment. America First and the working class versus the establishment in K Street. And that is the proxy battle that he's going to walk into if he does decide to do this. And they have to know this because we know they did the polling. So we have to know, or they have to know that that's the force they're going to run into. All right. But that's why it's important for people never to take your foot off the gas. Right. And I imagine you guys are not doing that. You're moving full steam ahead, fully expecting, because I tell people all the time, I tell viewers this all the time. These people don't roll over. They have to be made to submit. You have to bring them to heel. You have to defeat them. They have to be crushed. Otherwise, they will do everything in their power to resurrect themselves from the ashes of failure and misery and incompetence to once again rise to a position of power to make your life a living hell. They have to be just beaten down like whack-a-mole, John. It's a constant game of whack-a-mole. You can never get complicit. So, moving forward, what's your strategy, or not even your strategy? What's your plan? What are you guys doing moving forward?
Well, to be honest with you, this has kind of energized things even more because, candidly speaking, there were a number of people who, even though they quietly supported me, they were reluctant to be seen as crossing the chairwoman of appropriations. And so this has kind of provided them cover now that they can come into the forefront, which, again, I wish there weren't so many of us that were cowardly. I constantly remind people the number one command in the Bible is be not afraid. So, and look, we've been bold about this from the get-go. We knew this was David taking on Goliath, but as I always like to say, we know how that turned out in the end. So much so to the fact that we had political consultants who thought that they had this campaign sewn up, which we ended up electing not to use them. But they were recommending, oh, don't file early. Oh, don't go have lunch with Kay. Oh, don't do this.
Yep.
Well, guess what? We're here now because of the bold steps that we took. And if we had listened to their advice, Kay would still be in, and we would just now be filing and working from square one. Whereas right now, I really like our position. But your point is well made. We can't rest on our laurels. We haven't accomplished anything here. We haven't won yet. And in fact, the whole point of this, as I've said from the get-go, is that I am Trump or bust. President Trump is the one person who is able to go restore our Constitution and give back ownership of this country to we the people. Give us back our God-given rights that this government, this illegitimate, feckless regime has deemed that they, being our betters, can tell us what we can or can't do, whether we can open up our business or go to church or worship the way we want to, or our kids can go to school, or what we have to take in our body if it's an experimental gene therapy. We have to get back on track. We are headed in a terrible direction. President Trump is the man who can do that. He has shown it. He is taking all kinds of incoming flack because they fear him for tearing out this, administrative state and kind of restoring us to our Constitution. But to do that, President Trump cannot have more Paul Ryans in Congress when he gets there. Kay Granger was an exact replica of the Paul Ryan dilemma. And so, hey, we've helped by addition, by subtraction, but we need to make sure that President Trump is going to have legislators who actually care about the people they serve and worry about the country and put the well-being of the country and his agenda, which worked. We saw it. 2019, best economic year of my life. No new wars. Borders were secure. We didn't have this fentanyl crisis the way it is now. There wasn't human trafficking taking place openly on the streets. So, that's we're not going to rest until we do that. So we're going to continue to get out and meet with voters. We're going to continue to do meet and greets. We're going to continue to speak at the clubs and the grassroots events. And now, hopefully, we'll just be able to expand our audience by twofold.
Yeah, they will not. And by the way, preach it. I mean, I was just listening in a way, but right, preach it. But I'm just I'm putting my political strategist hat on now, and I'm trying to think about how anyone would be able to enter in this race now, and especially this person. I mean, this is just unbelievable. But I guess the bench is shallow, John. It's shallow, and it doesn't match what we found in the Fort Worth area. I think they thought it was a different Fort Worth than it was. I think they underestimate how popular America First has become, and they think, that's Parker County, that's not Tarrant County, and that's just not the case. And voters have to be reminded that we just did this as you were talking, right? So I just ran this as a voter file analysis, and of course it's Texas, so it has to be done through inference. But look at this advantage, John. I mean, it's such a huge advantage Republicans have in this district. Trump, plus or R plus 30 district, a little over 30 this last time. Very married, considering, right? It is more educated or more credentialed than others, but growing share of Hispanic voters, which is going to be big MAGA. And then just immensely conservative, more than 2-to-1 conservative advantage over identified liberals, and just not a huge moderate population. It's gotten less moderate over the years. Yeah. So there is no Democrat plus 30 district that would be represented by the Democratic equivalent of Kay Granger or her handpicked successor. It doesn't exist anywhere around the country. So it's time Republicans start to realize there's no reason for them to exist for them either. And there's who wins the primary will be the next congressman. And you are 100% correct. It doesn't matter. Right now, Trump is leading Republicans. He's overperforming them on the generic ballot versus Joe Biden. But none of that matters, John. Right. If a bunch of Paul Ryans, a bunch of Dade Phelans, a bunch of Kay Grangers, a bunch of the rest are waiting for him in the House of Representatives throughout all of these attempts by the right to really not just have a moment or a movement, but change the trajectory and culture of politics in our country. Every time, whether it was Trump or it was Reagan, they had the opportunity to do that. Democrats always acted like Democrats. You always knew that was going to be the case. It was the traitors and the backstabbers in the Republican Party that stopped those men from doing what they really could have done, and it's always a Judas, John. It's always a Judas, man. It's, that's where it comes from. I think about one of the biggest betrayals ever, speaking of John McCain, was the Department of Education under the Reagan administration. Think about how indoctrination would not have had the impact that we have seen over the last 50 years in this country or 40 something years since the 80s, right? Think
Yeah,
about
look
the
at the
damage.
anti-Semitism. Yeah, that's occurring all
The
across our
anti-Semitism.
campuses. Yeah, it's just astounding.
Yeah, take it away, because that's exactly. That's a great point. Anti-Semitism, anti-American sentiment, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, the
just this like,
1619 Project and this whole notion of American colonialism. You
yeah,
know, apparently they need a real lesson in history. No, your point's well founded. I mean, these people are the enemies inside the tripwire, and they have failed to
yes,
recognize that this party has left them behind. That President Trump has revitalized people, removed the blindfold from their eyes, and especially now with the contrast between today and 2019, they see clearly the America First agenda works. You know, this whole notion of make America great again being some kind of racist or xenophobic statement. Last time I checked, this is the most ethnically and racially diverse country in the world. And it says America great again. It doesn't say one certain segment or population. So what I aim to do is to make it abundantly clear to these rhinos and these establishment, uniparty types, that they'll find out come March 5th just how awakened these people and how angry, frankly, they are. They are angry at people who pretend to be Republicans and don't represent their conservative values, because this isn't a purple district. This is a ruby red district. They
Yep.
just haven't had somebody who represented their values really to go embolden them and give them an opportunity to support.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, the fact that this is a primary is Super Tuesday. It's going to be a proxy. There'll be all of these things with the court cases going on. I mean, the sentiment is not there for these people, and it's a shame that it has to go like this. That they just can't be the people they say they are, and they
Right.
run on. I mean, that wouldn't it just make it all very much simpler, John, if they were just not frauds, right? But this is the way it's got to be, and people got to remember that they have to be brought to heel. They have to be brought. They're not going to just hand it to you. It's never going to happen. But yeah, again, John, this is obviously a huge movement. I mean, MAGA Ascendant has been the theme for the last month, and this is a huge story and a huge development. And this was because, I mean, really, everyone's got to take a bow to you because you did this.
No.
Where could
This isn't me. This is just look. I play a small part in this, and for that I am
Mr.
grateful.
Modest.
But this is well. Look, it's
that
a
modesty's
team.
real, folks. I can tell you. I know him personally. That modesty is real. It's refreshing.
Well, the whenever this becomes about me, that's when I know I need to step away, because this isn't about me. This is about serving God, and as a result of serving God, serving my brothers and
Amen.
sisters. And so I will always stay true to that.
And we'll keep you to that. I don't think you got a strong head on your shoulders, but you got good people around you too. That's a huge part of it. I think, unfortunately, some of these staffers on Capitol Hill, they don't do their bosses any service, at all. They lose touch themselves, right? I mean, it's an easy place to lose grasp on reality. I try to these questions I get day in and day out from people. How could they think this? How could they do this? How could they take this position? How could they not see this, right? It's like some version of that every single day. And I hate going there, John, because I have to try to convey to people what I see when I go there. And it's like their $200 lunches every day are not interrupted. Their the bubble that surrounds them has not been popped yet, right? And we're starting to see urban bubbles pop, but DC will be the last bubble to pop when even a huge monumental crisis happens, like a debt bomb, right? That will you have immigration bombs blowing all over the country right now, from Chicago to New York, but it's not, Washington, DC is the most insulated, and it will always be the last one to see that bubble pop. And so I know it's difficult for people to kind of grasp how they can view these things and think these things, but it truly is this just terrible bubble, and the staffers get in them themselves. Everybody does, and they just lose connection with reality and lose touch with the rest of the country. And that's why what you've done here, putting yourself forward, it's a huge deal. The system doesn't work without people like you anymore, John. It just doesn't. It's broken. I said before, it's crippled by people like Kay Granger and just the way the system works. They're talking about the system of seniority as if it's a good thing. That's something that we should celebrate as part of her political career. The system of seniority and rent seeking coupled together is what has crippled us as a nation.
Right.
It has crippled it has taken away our ability to rise to these challenges and rise to the occasions and challenges of our time, unlike any other way, because it keeps getting worse every year, unlike prior generations, which have been able to put a lot of that aside. And until that is broken, until that whole system is broken, that's why you support term limits. Your district, 72%, I'm looking at 72% term limits. And the whole, the people currently there will never support that, because that's not the system they operate in. Term limits would be devastating to them.
No, but I like the idea that Representative Matt Gaetz, who I happen to admire a lot of his positions, has said, then let's put it to a floor vote. Let's let the American public see who really is going to put their money where their mouth is. And I like that idea a lot, because then voters get a chance to see, are they really who they say they are, or are they somebody who are really there for their own self-enrichment? And just on a positive note, because I try and make sure that I don't always leave people dour about the situation or the state of this country, what we easily do. But, look, I think the ascendancy of Mike Johnson to the speakership is not only just an excellent choice, but I think that's a real blow. I mean, because now you want to talk, that was a meritocracy decision. That wasn't based on seniority. That wasn't based on who's been contributing the most money to the RNC. In fact, they tried to use that against him. And they didn't understand. They viewed the fact that he isn't owned by the donor class and by K Street as like some kind of, chink in his armor. Whereas us, we the people, we see that as a noble strength and something to be touted and lauded.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there are those of us who feel that way, and then there are the others. And I've long said this, and I'll say it again. It would behoove the president to pay attention to these developments. Mike Johnson, he obviously gave a lot of he lavished a lot of praise on. But that this seat like this has got to belong to America first. And like I said, it would behoove him to just watch and get behind the right candidate, and I've long said he needs to run with a slate. Otherwise, there's an article in the New York Times today. They've been writing these articles about how Trump's team is not going to do what they did last time. This has been in the works for years, actually. People who want Trump to return to the White House, how there's like some 3,000 appointed positions in the federal government that don't require confirmation, that really can take control of the government, which he was not in control of the first time, not fully anyway, John. And anyway, basically, they can do that while he gets in, but he's still going to have the legislators that he's going to have to deal with and contend with. And look at this district. I mean, it's just not one of those where he should have people, busting his chops, and denying his agenda moving forward. Tarrant, by the way, there's always a few people, that are registered in Denton, a few people in Johnson, Palo Pinto, right? But for the most part, this is a Tarrant Parker, district. It's roughly 80-20. And when Tarrant goes even MAGA, then so goes everything else, brother. I mean, that's where we're at. And that district has got to be on board. So, like I said, I hope he does eventually do that and give the American people a real choice. Like, it's not just me. This is a movement. This is an agenda. This is a vision. And if you're voting for me, then, you cannot vote for John Boehner 2.0 over here, or Paul Ryan 2.0 over there, or Kay Granger 2.0 over here, Kay Granger in pants over here. I mean, you just can't do it. Otherwise, we're going to just be spinning our wheels like a freaking gerbil as always. But yeah, tell people where they can follow you along, John. Huge, just huge, brother. Huge. Great work.
Well, thank you. You can follow me at o'sheafortexas.com. That's got all my social media as well as my campaign information, our policy positions, events that we're going to be at, the ability to volunteer or to donate, which I strongly encourage, because trust me, the establishment's not going to stop. As you said, they're just finding a plug and play replacement. But like I said, I aim to show that this is an America First district. And hopefully a little birdie flies into President Trump's ears, because, I'm certainly going to do everything I can to deliver this district for him, while also campaigning to make sure this district is represented by the only America First candidate in the race.
Yeah, he's ahead by nearly it's looking like 45 points or something there. Now, depending if you look
That's
at the
all?
state, it's huge. I mean, just absolutely yeah, that's all. It's a huge lead going forward. And by the time, like I said, by the time we get there, it's possible that this is all just a wipe. You know, everyone is knocked out by South Carolina, and then it's just him and his candidates throughout the primary season, you know, setting the stage, setting the tempo. This is what the election's going to be about. Have a clean slate, you know, and we haven't seen Republicans really do that since 94. Even when Trump won in 16, it was them versus him. I mean, everybody versus him. It was his own party versus him. The Democrats was him. Hillary Clinton against him. The Wall Street and media and global finance. I mean, it was crazy. It would be a lot smarter for it to be Republicans with this vision against what the current state of affairs is now, and unified as much as to the extent they can be. And that's what they get with you, John. Again, thanks for coming on, brother. I hope you come back and talk to us real soon.
Well, it's my pleasure. You know, there are a lot of acquaintances that you meet while you're out working about, but you and Laura have a special place in my heart, and I'll always make time to get on with you guys.
Right back at you, brother. All the best to you and yours, and we'll see you soon.
All right. God bless. Bye, Laura.
There she is. Pops in for nobody. She pops in for John O'Shea. What does that tell you? Yeah, I got to tell you, like, one more time. Let me show you this one more time here with this. Huge development. Just almost impossible to overstate. And if she didn't think she could do it, I don't know how her cookie cutter replacement that is Wayne jumping in, you know, thinks he could do it. And by the way, here's the danger for that person. I don't know if you're paying attention to Ken Paxton's schedule or social media, but this man is coming after everybody who went against him. And it's constant, daily now. And that's not somebody who has a big social presence and someone who is, you know, he goes on War Room, he'll go on Fox, he'll do some hits here and there, but Ken Paxton is a man on a mission at this point to exact justice against all of those who fell for this, in not even fell for it, but participated in this disgusting attempt to impeach him. They lied to everybody, folks. They said that they had new information. They said they had new evidence. They did not. There was no attempt. There was no even ability to defend himself in the lower house in the state of Texas. And when it got to the Senate, it was an actual trial with actual testimony, with actual cross-examination, with actual rebuttal evidence, exculpatory evidence being able to be submitted. And that's why it went down. And yet it still didn't go down by the margin it should have, but it did. And now he's going after all of those people who ran a kangaroo court in the legislature to try to get him removed from office. Because, I mean, essentially they did vote to impeach him. He just was not convicted and removed from office. And he's on a mission. You send one of Dade Phelan's guys after his friend of 30 years, he's going to get it in as well. And you know what? That's going to lead to, I can't imagine that wouldn't lead to other things. Meaning who is, you know, Donald Trump thinks very highly of Ken Paxton. He's the only candidate who is associated with certain consultants, which Donald Trump supports. One and only one. That's it. That's how highly he thinks of Ken Paxton. Speaking of Ken Paxton, I didn't ask this question, but maybe it's one we should ask Ken and ask to have him on, because I'd love to talk to him about all of this that he's doing. You know, these endorsements, the attempt to make the legislature what they claim to be. Even in a state like Texas, there are all these frauds, these posers. I don't even know what to call them other than they're posers. They never run as an establishment Republican, right? They never run as somebody who's going to stab their base in the back. They never run as someone who would vote to impeach Ken Paxton. In the House, you know, the representatives, Kay Granger never ran as someone who was going to spend like a drunken sailor and put us $30+ trillion in debt. She never ran as somebody who would whip votes against Jim Jordan, right? They're full of crap. They're posers. And this district simply does not, you don't need, and let me see if I can even do it. Sometimes it takes a little bit long, but it's going to ask me to sign in. Don't pay no attention to my password here, all right, which isn't there anyway. You couldn't see it. But let's see if it does map it out real quick. And you can see just how Republican this district is. Sometimes it takes time. It takes time to execute and go through. But if we plot every single inferred Republican, every single inferred Democrat up on the map, you would see how red this district really is. And there's, how Taran County itself voted in 2020, which is why a lot of people thought that there would be an opportunity to hurt Trump in this area or to challenge him, oppose him in this area. And as it turns out, there's a lot of voter remorse in the rest of the country. And as it turns out, because Joe Biden edged Trump out in Taran County by less than 2,000 votes, it was a surprising result to everybody. Why? Because we know why. Because of, what's it called? I'm having a brain fart here. Help me out, Laura. Early voting, the changing of the electoral system, et cetera, et cetera. So where are there places where there are voter remorse? Heavily in areas like the surrounding counties, for instance, in Georgia, surrounding metropolitan counties around Atlanta, the Fort Worth, Dallas, Texas area in Georgia, just massive voter remorse. Where do these people come from? The 8 to 12% that tell us they voted for Joe Biden, but this time around, they would vote for Donald Trump. It's areas like this. All right. So even though Taran County went to Biden a little bit, it's not all of it, and it carved some of Taran out. The reddest parts, again, I think she won it by 31 or 32 points in 2022. So there is no reason whatsoever for you to settle for somebody who is not representative of your vote. And I just don't, again, I don't see it because the sentiment isn't there. We've seen these rapid developments, it's like one after the other. They are reacting to what they know and see on the ground to be true. And they're not going to sit there and embarrass themselves if they don't have to. They're just not going to. Let's see if we can go ahead and do this again. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, and I see my presidential map is kind of rolling and rolling and rolling. All right, let me remind you while we're waiting on that. Let me remind you about the public polling project, the Rust Belt poll, and speaking of Georgia, the Georgia poll, right? So if we can go there real quick, see where we're at. I haven't checked it myself in a while, so we're going to be looking at it for the first time with you. Let's pull it up while that thing does its thing. Where are we? We're fairly close. Georgia kind of stalled, it looks like, but we're fairly close on national and the Peach State poll. Obviously there's more in the national. We already took what was funded for the national and we just did the national and decided the rest of it we'll use for the Rust Belt poll. All right. So the national poll, I'm not going to change its name. Just know, if you're watching the show, just know that the rest of the funding for the national poll is going to the Rust Belt poll. All right. The Peach State poll, we have to wait until that's just totally funded. All right. So we'll see how it goes. There's, an appetite for different states, and I never know how strong that appetite is until we put it up. Laura and I always put in what we can and what we do, so we'll obviously help it get there if it stalls right before, or pretty close to it. But as far as the national poll goes, honestly, and everyone, you guys have your own preference. Me, at this moment, I would say I prefer that the Rust Belt poll would be funded because I think the primary is over. And I hear what people are saying, though. The other part of the other argument is that people like Team DeSantis are still arguing Trump may have a hard time winning Georgia and Arizona, and how he can, but Trump can't. I don't know how that's possible when they're not winning anything. All right. So if we went back to the Real Clear Politics average, DeSantis is in danger of losing the state of Texas. Nikki Haley is losing the state of Texas. Trump is up in the state of Texas 8 points. So that's a Sun Belt state. If you're running that far behind Trump in Texas, how far are you going to run behind him in Georgia? How far are you going to run behind him in Arizona? I just don't buy it. Morning Consult polls back to being tied after Biden being up by 1 or 2 or something like that. It's now back to being tied, yet DeSantis slipped another point, and it's Biden +4. At this point, we're so convinced that we're right and have been right. I don't even find any value in wasting your money on polling Ron DeSantis as well. If we're going to poll Ron DeSantis as well in a hypothetical head-to-head, there is no defense. There's no valid reason to do that without also polling Haley, because he is no longer the de facto runner-up candidate. That is done. And that's the last thing I wanted to read to you today. Let me see if I can grab it. Here it is. Okay. I had mentioned it before, and I think it's worth reading again, because the fact of the matter is, if Ohio does not, I'm not talking about a closer than expected result. If they don't beat Trump in Iowa, if they don't beat him in Iowa, there's no point to even talk about the rest of the primary. If they do beat him in Iowa, it still is unlikely they'll beat him. That's the reality. That's the truth. The delusion out there is getting really sad. And then every time, especially Haley is much better at this. Team Haley is much better at dealing with criticism and dealing with the negative news cycle. They're also much better at harnessing a positive news cycle and spinning it to their advantage. DeSantis, every time they get in a negative cycle loop, or every time they get bad polling, every time, they can't refute the arguments that I made this argument. I made many of these arguments the day before Mark Caputo even wrote this. They go right back to this ridiculous kind of childish la 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 COVID, la 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 mask, la 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 COVID, la 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 the jab, la 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 lockdown. It's pathetic. It's pathetic, and it's not true. Their version of their revisionist history isn't true. Many of these people weren't even living in Florida at the time. Laura, they didn't even live there. We did. My wife worked for the state. Colorado representative, other traitor, Ken Buck, is out. Good news for Republicans, there is a true blue, or a true, I would say, a true America firster in that race. He was done to. This is what I'm talking about. There's no denying that MAGA is just winning everywhere, despite being, or at least the tide is, because they haven't won anything yet. John is right, but they're racking up wins on the playing field ahead of the main game. They're racking up little strategic victories before the final battle kind of thing. All right. And it's never the final battle, but you know what I mean. The main event. Only thing is, these people are going to do a lot of damage on the way out. Their crab in the pot theory is going to be on full display. What's the crab in the pot theory? Every time one of the crabs almost get out of the pot, some other selfish son of a wants to pull them back in. If I'm going to boil alive, you're going to boil alive with me, pulling you right back in. That's what Ken Buck is going to do on his way out. That's what Kay Granger is going to do on his way out, her way out. That's what Adam Kinzinger did on his way out. Even after being defeated, that's what Liz Cheney did and continues to try to do now. Who? John McCain. Thank you. I mean, right. Republicans are little crabs, disgusting little crustaceans in the pot. Regular Republicans, I would say. All right, so let's read this by Mark, because, again, they have this thing they react to. I'm not going to get into the COVID thing again. I mean, when Andrew from the K File is stomping you and eating your lunch for breakfast, then obviously you're a liar. All right, so let's go and move this. Again, Laura, it really pisses me off how a lot of these, now DeSantis supporters who were living in California when you and I were dealing with that shit are now want to tell us what we know to be true. Up yours. You were sitting with your boyfriend in California. You're not even a real person. I mean, the other one, he was grifting for $10,000 GoFundMes so he could move to D.C., then move to Miami, and then he finally, ends up in Miami? Don't tell me what the hell happened. The beaches were closed. He closed 2 major beaches by executive fiat, and then gave locals the power to close other beaches at their discretion, which guess what? They did. Many of them. They did. Others just implemented distancing guidelines. So if you wanted to walk your dog, that's different. But there were no mass gatherings. There were no parties. There was no normal activity. The restaurants and the bars were all closed down anyway. So nobody even wanted to go because you couldn't go and get something to eat. You couldn't have a drink. Spring break was done. Remember? Go home. Maybe come back next year. Whole businesses put out of business. Remember the church? We need more money to keep the lights on. Come on. DeSantis' camp faces another PR disaster with Iowa polls release. Another poll undercuts DeSantis' claims that his underperforming campaign has momentum. When Donald Trump's super PAC began a $1 million ad campaign attacking Ron DeSantis in Iowa, the Florida governor's presidential campaign was quick to declare it good news. Quote, Team Trump is now being forced to publicly admit that Ron DeSantis is climbing in Iowa, unquote. The campaign told the New York Times late Friday. Let me tell you, though, and I think I told you this at the time, that was never true. It's just that Trump wants this guy not only to lose, he wants him buried, gone, destroyed. When you're facing the rest of your life in prison and someone you literally made betrays you, you don't want to just beat them. You want to humiliate them. You want to destroy them, as any human being would. On Monday, that talking point took another major hit with the release of a widely respected Iowa poll, which showed DeSantis losing 3 percentage points in 2 months. That put DeSantis at an anemic 16%, tied with Nikki Haley, who jumped 10 points. Trump, meanwhile, gained a marginal 1 point and has 43% overall, little threatened by either. And in fact, let me just note that DeSantis' own internal poll, which I tell you all to take with a grain of salt, is actually worse news. Well, it has Trump higher at 46, but it also has DeSantis higher at 20 and Nikki Haley at 12. I do think Nikki Haley's support is softer, but I think they're full of crap. All right. And it was also conducted before Pence suspended his campaign. All right. So if head to head, I can tell you right now, their head to head polling show they don't. We went over this with the consolidation argument. Their head to head polling shows Trump at 58 against DeSantis. So you can't win. That put DeSantis an anemic 16%, tied with Nikki Haley, who jumped 10 points. Trump, meanwhile, threatened by neither. Beyond undercutting the DeSantis narrative that he's, quote, climbing, or that the primary is a, quote, two-man race, the poll also highlights the alternate universe constructed by chronically underperforming candidate, starting with his glitch-filled launch on Twitter, which his campaign claimed was a positive sign he, quote, broke the internet. By that point, DeSantis was already falling in polls. You ready? First it was, wait until we launch. He'll do better. Then it was, Laura's laughing her ass off in the other room. Then it was, wait until the first debate. Then it was, wait until October 31st, said a top campaign fundraiser who spoke on the condition of anonymity to vent frustrations without repercussions. I can bet, if you gave me 3 guesses, I bet you I'd be able to guess who this is. Do we have polling that isn't as bad as the Iowa poll? Yes. Do we believe our polling? Yes. Does it matter? No. It's another PR disaster of not meeting expectations. Here's the thing, though. This is one person who is still clinching to the fact that Mitt Romney's polling firm is right, that other people who have been wrong a lot, all right, like WPA Intel, are right. The fact of the matter is they have been outliers from the beginning until, Laura, they poll for their, like the one firm actually has contracts with media outlets. And then when they poll for the media, their poll is totally different, right? Still, the DeSantis campaign isn't completely wrong about the view of his candidacies in the eyes of Trump or his MAGA Inc. super PAC, which has spent $21.5 million attacking the governor, according to campaign finance reports. That's on top of $282,000 from a pro-Haley super PAC targeting DeSantis, who has been the target of more negative independent expenditures, $21.8 million, than any other presidential candidate this cycle, including President Joe Biden, according to independent campaign finance analyst Rob Pyers. All right. But I would say this, the Trump ads and the Haley did a good job of this as well. I played the clip with one of the ads I played the actual moment that is being featured in one of the ads where Haley beat him over the drum beat him like a drum over fracking, because of course it's true. What Haley was saying was true. The only thing she said that wasn't true, like I brought up to you guys before, is that he didn't ban it before the vote happened. He just promised, he campaigned on banning fracking before the voters actually did the vote. And then 2 days after he took the office of the governor, he signed the executive order anyway. So, I mean, she's right, though, in principle, and she's right like 90% of what she was saying. And there's no way for him to refute that because it's still on the campaign website. As governor, I will work to ban fracking in the state of Florida. I mean, it says it right there. Anyway, so the Trump camp isn't scared of DeSantis, said Roger Stone, a longtime Trump confidant who also close to MAGA Inc.'s pollster and strategic consultant, Tony Fabrizio. The Trump camp is responding to the media hype over Ron DeSantis, and they're putting the final nails in DeSantis' coffin. Listen, I'm telling you from what I have heard Tony Fabrizio himself say, Roger is telling the truth here. They don't fear Ron DeSantis is going to come back and beat Donald Trump. They just want to end it. Nikki Haley is definitely a threat, but to Ron DeSantis. Stone. And by the way, I talked to somebody in Trump world, actually two, and I specifically talked about Nikki Haley with them, and they do see it as Roger Stone is portraying it, that they're really just kind of swapping voters and they're having like a little shuffling of the deck, but that she cannot she can't exceed Trump or threaten Trump because the lane isn't big enough. So they're just trading off never Trumpers with each other. And that's absolutely true. So I know Roger's telling the truth here because I've talked to them about it myself. And I'm like, are you concerned about our rise? And they just laughed. And they're like, you just pulled it your damn self. You know what we're saying is true. So I'm like, yeah, I did. You're right. I mean, because they're right. When Trump wins Iowa, he's going to be the nominee. And the fact is, Ron DeSantis' disloyalty to Trump needs to be repaid. This is what is going on here, folks. When I first started to tell people that Ron DeSantis was running for president, they didn't want to believe it themselves. Nope. They didn't think Ron was going to screw them like this.
Not like threaten them, just the fact that it's a betrayal.
It's a betrayal, Laura. He was facing time in jail.
And you do another.
Yeah, but telling donors we're going to win because he's going to jail.
Yeah, that's just wrong. I mean, I would say the best analogy is Trump looks at DeSantis like, when somebody keeps clicking a pen. I mean, the pen's not going to hurt you, but it's just annoying. Can
you guys hear her? I mean, I don't know, because we have these like isolated sound stations and they may not be able to hear you now. You may have to get closer.
But it's just like DeSantis is that annoying kid that keeps
clicking the pen.
And you're just like, you turn around and you're like, will you just stop? You're not.
That's the way I feel about his so-called influencers now. Mm-hmm. And just, they do know they're gone real soon and they've totally lost their relevance soon. So it's over for them.
That's what I'm saying.
One is just hoping Ron DeSantis is president so he gets pardoned when they indict him, right? That friggin' crook, that's con man, loser. I'm not even going to say the name because it's a vicious name, but I refuse to refer to him by his real name. So instead, I'll refer to him by the name that sounds like a sex toy, because that's all he is anyway.
Oh God, moving on.
Anyway, and that's the only way he's getting anywhere near it. That's the only. An official with MAGA Inc. would not comment on the record for this story, but also indicated how personal the race is for team behind Trump, whose endorsement and support enabled DeSantis to rocket from relative obscurity as a 3-term congressman and win the primary for governor in 2018. Not only that, he would have lost the general without Donald Trump. DeSantis has a history of treating people badly, and karma's a bitch. Yep. Anyway, moving on here, let's get to some of what he is talking about. The full Grassley is when you visit all 99 counties in the state of Iowa. DeSantis has been trying to emulate that, but it doesn't seem to really, it doesn't work. He's just continued to lose momentum as he's done it anyway. So if Trump can bury DeSantis in Iowa, the former president's campaign, and even those who don't support him believe the race is fundamentally over. Folks, the race is fundamentally over right now. All right. According to Trump's campaign, he's collected 41,000 signed pledges from Iowans committing to show up on the January 15 caucus for Trump. That's double what DeSantis has, according to those. And I know that's true. DeSantis only, when they got to 20,000, they thought it was great. And at that time, Trump was at like 38,000 already. And a lot of them they're going after like normal caucus goers. There are apparently a slew of first-time caucus goers. They're probably going to break the record this year. And Trump is winning them overwhelmingly. I mean, 2-1. It's overwhelming. Anyway, so Never Back Down is the one where that information comes from, more than double. That's absolutely true. About 200,000 are expected to caucus. Yeah, and by the way, it says Never Back Down, which has shouldered the organizing and advertising responsibilities of the governor's cash-strapped campaign. They're putting themselves at real risk of being indicted. You can get a violation of FEC, but when you flaunt violations as badly as they're flaunting some of these, and on top of that, with the allegations of pay for play, they're not even allegations. They appear to be very clear instances of pay for play. Then you're really just asking for it. So it's very risky what he is doing. The two men have touted their grassroots. But Steve Schleffler, a veteran of Ohio Republican presidential campaigns and president of Iowa Faith and Freedom, says Trump is a good ground operation. He didn't have that in 2016. DeSantis has a lot of field people on the ground, and that's what you need to win. I don't think anything is cooked in the books yet. I've seen stranger things. But what you have never seen, never, is anyone beat someone with a lead like this. So these people saying that, well, it was finicky like that. It's not that finicky. What I'm saying is they are exaggerating. And there is no historical comparison that you could make to give hope to anyone who supports anyone other than Donald Trump. And by the way, in 2016, don't forget, before I read this, Ted Cruz, Team Cruz, played a dirty trick on Ben Carson's campaign, and even Karl Rove admitted the math we did was 100% correct. That dirty trick likely cost Donald Trump the 2016 caucus anyway. In 2016, Ted Cruz won the crowded GOP caucus after beginning to rise in October of the previous year, meaning this month. DeSantis isn't beginning to rise. He is falling. Cruz, while Carson was ahead in the Des Moines poll in October, he was only ahead by 8 points, number one, and he was at 28%. That's it. But Cruz already had begun to rise. Trump was more disorganized and only had been polling at 20%, 21, not more than the 40 he's at now. And the Des Moines poll has Trump lower than other polls. And Cruz only trailed him by 11 before the caucus. DeSantis trails by 27 right now. Cruz ultimately won with just 27% of the vote by a 3-point margin, folks. That's it. And Trump still became the nominee anyway. Cruz's campaign is now DeSantis's campaign. In the contested and crowded 2012 field, Rick Santorum skyrocketed late and barely beat Mitt Romney, but Romney never received more than 25%. Mitt Romney was also hated by a lot of evangelicals because he's a Mormon. Mitt Romney, Ted Cruz were also not former presidents beloved by the party. They didn't have 20, 35, 25, 30-point leads with evangelicals. Or 40%, the capability of making first-time caucus goers 40 to 45% of the electorate, which you're winning by 2-1. This is effing delusional, folks. In 2008. And it's a great job by Mark. That's why I'm going over to read it. Credit is due when credit is due. Mike Huckabee began his rise in October, too. He won with 30% of the vote against John McCain, who collapsed after reaching only a high of 30. And it doesn't matter because McCain ultimately won. By the way, Romney ultimately won, even though they lost Iowa. Santorum won. He did not win the nomination. By the way, in 2016, Cruz won. He did not win the nomination. So they're acting as if, even if they pull off some freaking Hail Mary miracle, history is still on their side. It's not. Because the demographics aren't on their side. It is much more likely Trump just steamrolls them all. In 2000, George W. Bush, he was polling in the 40s and handily won the caucus against Steve Forbes and McCain, who didn't compete in Iowa at the time. Bush won the caucus, his party's nomination, and the presidency, like one of the few modern day examples. However, Iowa State, and I would say this, Bush's, again, that vote, I will not change my mind. At the time for Bush, even when he was in the 40s, was only 20%. He ultimately won with 41. Trump's is now between 63 and 76%. Iowa Senate President Amy Sinclair, who has been a top surrogate of DeSantis in the state, said the electorate in Iowa hasn't fully tuned into the race. That's bullcrap. They are tuned in. And that once voters do, DeSantis' more numerous legislative and law enforcement endorsers are going to turn out the vote for him. It's going to mean a whole lot in terms of getting boots on the ground, she said. In Iowa, Dallas County, GOP Chair Kelly Koch, I think it is, said it's true that most voters haven't made up their minds, but she said the 4 criminal indictments of Trump at the hands of the Democrat appointed prosecutors have just kept Trump's support high among Republicans because they feel it's all politically motivated. And the October 7th terror attacks in Israel reminded Republicans of Trump's pro-Israel record, as well as Haley's foreign policy chops when she was UN ambassador. Trump is basically an incumbent. Trump is just hard to beat. Every time there's a new event, they make an excuse for why he can't fall. Have you noticed that? It was Roe v. Wade, and now it's the attack. You think voters are dumb? Voters have been telling us for months. They've been paying attention enough to know that they take a risk with everybody else. They take no risk with Donald Trump. Trump is basically an incumbent. That's kind of true. Public polling in October hasn't historically been indicative of who will win the Iowa caucus, and it won't be this time either, the DeSantis campaign said in a written statement. That's not true. Again, it has been when you reach certain levels. They've been saying this for months, and the truth is, national polling has been historically predictive. Months ago, it started to be months ago. We told you that at this point, general election polling can still be a little bit spotty, but the primary polling now is in fact predictive if you exceed certain levels, which he has done. On top of that, the endorsement race is not even close. Nobody finds it funny that every time somebody aligns themselves with DeSantis against Trump, even in the state of Iowa, a once popular person falls. Kim Reynolds. Steve Deace's endorsement was supposed to be huge, remember? DeSantis has fallen since Steve Deace endorsed him. Fallen. Not risen, he has fallen. So tell me, what are we missing here? He was at 20%. 19% in the last Des Moines. Then the endorsement came, he's at 16. His average is 17.3 because CBS still had him at 21, but they also had Trump at 51. It was Trump plus 30, more than the Trump plus 27. The Iowa State University poll is Trump 38, with Trump at 55, DeSantis at 17. Come on, guys. Public polling in Iowa has been wrong by like 10 points. It's never been wrong by 30 points. It's just freaking loose. This is ridiculous, Laura. It's not predictive. It is predictive when it's this big. When the lead is this big, it is. Mark just went over it, yet he just released a statement that completely contradicts what Mark says. Mark is right. All right, he says he's going to work the media buy in Iowa, attacking the governor with false and negative ads. Okay, whatever. I mean, what false to you, right? You're the one who pulled your own hoax, very fine people hoax. And anyway, so we're done with that. So Mark does a great job of laying out historically how it goes. Laura finally, at the end of the show, killed that mother fly. Right? That's all right. He can't get in the way. He's too small. Oh, yeah, he can. His little face is there. Don't give him. He's so cute, though. Hi, baby. You ready for daddy? It's 2 o'clock. You expect it to be over by now, right? Daddy's coming. I'm coming. All right. So with that in mind. So you want to say deuces? You can say deuces.
Deuces, everybody.
He's so cute. How on earth did I contribute chromosomes to that cute kid? All right, Laura says deuces as well, so we're gonna have to go. But before we do, don't forget November 7th, coverage starts at 6 p.m. Be there or be square. It'll be on for local supporters and YouTube members. All right. I may have it for Getter people too. Is like Getter is saying they can do like some kind of like pay-per-view thing where people don't want to be a member of locals and they don't want to be a member of recurring subscription, you could still offer it to them. And I just don't know how I would even price tier that, frankly. I mean, how much would it really be? I don't know. And then that's something we could try to work out. But I'm more concerned about the tech. I want to get the tech right. And if that means less destinations to stream to with the tech being right, then that's fine with me. Don't forget again about the public polling project. Share it far and wide. Contribute if you can. Help us get to the finish line on that. Of course, the best way to follow what we're doing is to sign up on Locals. peoplespundit.locals.com. I stayed home instead of going to Mar-a-Lago for the premiere because if I felt comfortable enough that we were advanced enough to get these graphics out and about, I would have went and I would have said, we'll deal with it when I get back, but I'm not. And I'm waiting on a different API because I don't know. We're not sure whether the problem was the API testing data itself or if it was something else. So we'll just have to see. All right, with that in mind, I'm going to go deal with that now, which is kind of fun until I get so frustrated I want to pull my hair out, right? But yeah, share the public polling project far and wide because I'm dying to do the Rust Belt poll, you know? Dying to. Deuces, Roro. Deuces. Right back at you. All right. We'll see you guys on Friday with at least David Giglio. Looks like we're going to have Devin Nunes next week. Got a lot we want to talk to him about, too. That would be cool. And as always, you know, I hope everybody had a good and safe Halloween. I had a blast last night. I really did. Sore as all hell because this kid, unlike my older two, we use very big age difference between my last child with my other children. And normally my other kids would go out and trick or treat for like a half an hour at that age and 40 minutes and be done. This kid hung with the older kids and I was not about to leave him alone with 14-year-old teenagers. No way. So we did it. And Laura and I walked the whole way. He was out there the whole time. He was just being Marshall and being cute. And it was awesome. And he was a trooper. I've never seen that before. Never seen it. All right, locals, keep an eye out for when we try to test that stuff. I will give you guys a little treat. That is the little background. You see that little background? You guys like that? That's cool, right? That's part of it. That's one of them. All right, so we give you a little. It was there, so I just gave him a little treat. It was there. I saw it was there. But there's hopefully going to be more coming. So we will see you on Friday. We'll see our guests on Friday. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers. Don't forget to like. Smash the like button, share far and wide, and Rumble, subscribe. We're so close to the 15,000 mark. I think we were, 3 away? Subscribe, whether you're on Locals, Getter, subscribe to them all and share them out. And we'll see you guys on Friday. All the best, folks. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers.